Today on Health Coach Talk, we dig into gut health. We hear so much about gut health. What does it mean? What is also this gut-brain axis? What is the connection? And a lot of the time in this discussion, we get into probiotics, which is an area that is so confusing for many people. And you walk into any grocery store, health food stores, and you see rows upon rows of probiotics. Some are in the refrigerator case, some are not. How do you choose? How do you know? There are so many strains out there. Some have one strain, some have multiple strains. And so we get into that with my special guest today, who I have known for many, many years, long before I founded FMCA. Her name is Tina Anderson. Let me tell you about Tina. She is the CEO and founder of Just Thrive. This is a gut health supplement company with its flagship product being a spore-based probiotic, Just Thrive probiotic and antioxidant. Her journey, though, into the world of health had a unique start and unusual twists and turns. She began her career as a lawyer, and then when her second child arrived, she left that high-stress job behind to focus on her family, and she was able to use her legal skills to point her career in a new direction as the in-house counsel for a family pharmaceutical company. But that resulted in another change of direction because, frustrated by the many abuses in this pharmaceutical industry, she turned toward the field of natural health, and that's where she found her life's work. She channeled her energy into learning all she could about disease prevention and good health maintenance. That led her to discover the importance of gut health and how connected and crucial it is for overall health and wellness. So along with her husband, they created a unique supplement that contains the superior probiotic strains of renowned researcher Dr. Simon Cutting. She is focusing on sharing her passion for wellness, helping others live their best physical and emotional lives. I know you're going to enjoy my conversation with Tina Anderson. I am excited to talk with you. This is Tina Anderson, who I have known for many, many years.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Dr. Sandi. I am so excited to be here with you. Like you said, we've known each other for many years, and it's so fun that our paths have crossed again in the professional setting.
Oh, absolutely. So we're going to get into all about probiotics. I know there's a lot of confusion out there about what they are. Do we need them? How do we take them? And we'll get into those topics. But first, let's go back to some of the basics because we hear so much now about gut health. It's always talking about gut health, the importance of gut health. So can you just explain, if somebody were to come up to you, she'd say, Tina, what do you mean by gut health?
Yeah. So it's really simple. It's just the totality of organisms living in and on us, and most of which are found in our digestive tract. So, and we now know that the gut is really dictating virtually every aspect of our overall health. And so I think so many people for so long have associated gut health as being like, I have gas, or bad gut health being you have gas or bloating or diarrhea or constipation, some type of digestive issues. But we now know that these microorganisms that are living in and on us are really impacting all of our overall health, from our skin health to our brain health to all different areas of our life. So certainly if you have some type of digestive issues, that is a sign that you have some gut imbalance going on. But what we're now seeing is that you have a skin rash of some sort. That would indicate that you have some gut imbalance going on. That's where you should look first. Let's say you have some mood issues. You suffer from anxiety, depression, any type of those types of issues that that those are really likely stemming from some type of imbalance in your gut. And we often say that 90% of non-communicable diseases are really associated with some type of imbalance in your gut. So gut health, very simply, is just the totality of organisms living in and on us that are really impacting virtually all aspects of our overall health.
That's such a good way of explaining it, because most people would think, okay, your gut, well, they'll think it's my stomach, the small intestine, large intestine, organ systems. But now when we say gut, we really need to think about the kind of like I once heard it described as like a pond. There's all these creatures like that are there, and you want diversity. And so it is really, we're talking about the microorganisms that
Yes.
are living with us. And as opposed to a specific organ system, but certainly they can impact that. And one of the things they impact a big way, which we're also hearing so much about, is this gut-brain axis. Back in my day, I was a psychologist for many years, and we didn't talk about the gut-brain axis in traditional psychology. But can you explain again what that is if someone has heard the term, but they don't really understand what's going on?
Sure. So the gut-brain axis is just basically that connection between your brainstem down to your gut. And so the gut is sending signals back up to the brain, and the brain is sending signals back down to the gut through the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve, we call it the communication superhighway. It's sending signals back and forth to each other. And so we see this all the time where somebody has they tend to have anxiety, let's say, and then you dig in further into their history and you find out that, they actually have a lot of intestinal issues. And there is a huge connection between that, because if you have this dysbiosis going on in your gut, you have this imbalance going on in your gut bacteria, this imbalance is now sending signals back up to your brain, and, making you feel anxious or feel depressed or whatever it might be. And then the reverse is true. And that's why so many times with people who have, IBS, let's say, or some type of digestive issue, one of the things I always suggest is doing meditation, calming down. I mean, there's a reason why people who are stressed, or think about the times you're scared about something, you feel like you have to go to the bathroom, or you're excited about something and you have butterflies in your stomach. I mean, this is because of this gut-brain axis, and it's all done through the vagus nerve.
Yeah, and we've heard these expressions. We say it all the time, like trust your gut, acting on gut instinct. So it is about the power of this gut-brain axis, but now we're really able to see exactly how that operates. And so there's so many things that we talk about, like what to do for gut health. But what are some of the basic ways to start supporting your gut? Let's say somebody has really, experiencing gut issues, but they don't know where to start. What
Yeah.
say are some of the basics in supporting your
So the thing is, there are so many offenders in our world that we live in to our gut health. And one of the biggest offenders out there is glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in Roundup. It is being sprayed all over our produce. It's in our rainwater. It's everywhere. And so I always recommend that people try to avoid glyphosate as much as possible. Really try to eat organic. And I know that's hard and I know it's expensive, but there are ways to do it by trying to find frozen vegetables that are organic, and just really trying to get away from those glyphosates, because glyphosate is such a huge offender to our gut health. It is literally getting rid of really the good bacteria in our gut. With antibiotics is also a huge offender in our gut. So I would always recommend that you try to avoid antibiotics. I think most people know that by now. Even the medical community is starting to understand that we don't want to be overprescribing antibiotics, but knowing that even our animal products sometimes include, have antibiotics in them. So antibiotics, I would argue, they're really bad, but I would argue that glyphosates are actually worse than antibiotics, because antibiotics kill the good bacteria as well as the bad bacteria. Of course, we want them to kill off the bad bacteria, but they're also killing off the good bacteria, which is what we don't want them to do. But glyphosate really only targets the beneficial bacteria in our gut. So really, lifestyle and the food that we eat is so important to take care of our gut. I think it's one of the most important things to do is just to avoid a lot of these glyphosates, avoid the antibiotics in our food, and then taking it. Of course, I know antibiotics save lives, and there are, of course, times when we need to take them, but really try to avoid them. And, the CDC estimates that 50% of antibiotics that are prescribed are actually unnecessary. And that's not always just because the doctor's pushing them. A lot of times patients want them. I'm going to Mexico. I want to make sure I'm fine. When really, if you're destroying your gut, your immune system, 70% of your immune system is found in your gut. And now you're destroying the very system that is going to help fight a virus that you have. So really trying to be mindful of when you are to take an antibiotic, because they are big disruptors in your gut microbiome. So avoiding antibiotics, avoiding glyphosates, eating a diverse group of foods. I know we live in this time where it's like, I'm paleo, I'm vegan, I'm, keto, whatever it is. And I am just a huge fan of eating a diverse group of foods as much as possible, trying to go to ethnic grocery stores and find different types of roots and tubers. And we're all creatures of our own, of habit, but really trying to avoid just eating the same types of things all the time, because that is, believe it or not, a way to increase diversity in your microbiome. And just eating those whole, real, clean foods is so important. Staying away from ultra processed foods. I'm sure any of the people listening to this podcast are not people that are indulging in ultra processed foods anyway, but it's always important to remember, like, all those chemicals, all those things are just such huge offenders to our gut health. So, eating a diverse group of foods, really trying to focus on stress reduction, taking walks in nature, being one with nature, meditation, all those things that sound so woo-woo are just so impactful to our gut health. It's unbelievable what an impact they have.
These are all such good strategies and doable. So certainly taking walks in nature, taking some breaths, looking at how you're going to have a different reaction to potential stressors that are going on in your life. And then the basic food strategies. We hear so many people say, well, I can't afford to eat organic. It's out of reach for me. And really, there's been a lot of work that has shown that that's not true, that you can, if you take out the ultra processed foods right there, you're ahead of the game financially. And then there are when I first started in this field, it was back in the 80s. And
you're amazing. You're such a pioneer. I love it.
We had a small little mom and pop health food store. I had to drive like 35 minutes to get there. And then a bunch of us, my kids were little at the time, and we had a food co-op. So we would get together, and no cell phone. So we'd fax in, we'd get together in person, decide what we were going to get. It was this co-op up in Wisconsin that was a wholesaler. And so we would fax in our order we'd fill out this handwritten form. And then once a month, this truck would come down from Madison, Wisconsin, went to one of our houses, and we would all go and unload, like, oh, we have a case of oranges and we'll split them up. And it was all,
wow,
various products. But now we are seeing the major grocery stores and discount store, Costco, they have wonderful organic blueberries and organic bananas and so many things you can find, grass-fed beef. And so there, if you look for it, you will find, you're now increasing your awareness, and you can see, here, you'll look for that. And they are seeing the benefit of catering to these customers. And so more and more, Albertson, I interviewed on the podcast, someone who is with the Albertson, they have a lot of chains, Ralph, Safeway, and I'm always so pleasantly surprised when I am in there, say, oh, wait, I didn't realize they had, these products. And so, and you can often ask many of the times if you have a relationship with the store manager and say, can you bring this in? And they'll accommodate you as well.
Yeah, it is really an exciting time, especially for people like you who have been doing this for so many years. So and people like, me, who I feel like I came into this world from like the dark side and came to a whole new, I saw the light finally. And it is really exciting to see so many people be demanding these kinds of products out there. And it's actually way less expensive to eat this way, even if you are paying for the organic, because if you're not eating out and you're not paying for all that and you're feeling better, you eat healthier, you feel better, you're more productive in your work and your home life. So it really is a more economical way anyway.
Absolutely. So let's turn to probiotics, which you are known for. In a nutshell, first of all, there's a lot of confusion: prebiotic, probiotic, postbiotic. So how can you differentiate, and what would you say are some of the biggest myths about probiotics that are out there?
Yeah. So a probiotic is a live microorganism. When conferred in adequate amounts, confers a benefit onto the host, which is the body. So basically, it's a live microorganism that when it's there in the right amount, it's going to actually make a change in the body. And so that first part of the definition, just being a live microorganism, is where many probiotics, unfortunately, on the market don't even pass that first part of the definition of being a live microorganism. And we know this because a lot of probiotics that you see out there are refrigerated, for example. So if a probiotic needs to be refrigerated, it means it can't even withstand the room temperature of the store shelf. So if it can't withstand the room temperature of the store shelf, how in the world would it survive your body temperature, which is 98.6, which the answer is it doesn't. But let's just say it did for argument's sakes. What happens when it hits the stomach, which is very acidic? If these are so sensitive that they can't withstand the room temperature of the store shelf, how in the world would they survive the body temperature and then the acidic environment of the stomach? And the answer is that most of them don't. I mean, the overwhelming majority of probiotics are just dying by the time they get to the intestines. And therefore, they are not a live microorganism and they are not delivering an adequate amount onto the host. So, we, as you know, we work with strains called spore-based probiotics, and spores they have this endospore shell around themselves, and they allow the strains to actually survive. And we have not enteric-coated them. This is not something that we created in a lab. These are actually the way these bacillus strains were found in the soil. Years and years ago, our ancestors lived off the soil, they lived off the land, and they would eat roots and tubers off the land. And those roots and tubers would be teeming with this beneficial bacteria, these bacillus spores. And these spores were meant to be consumed on a regular basis and meant to be supportive of your digestive system. And even today, if we go to tribes in Tanzania, you see these tribes, they have virtually no gastric issues, no gut issues whatsoever. And they are just they don't have Tums and they don't have proton pump inhibitors or anything like that. They're just eating off the land and getting these beneficial bacteria. And so that's what these bacillus strains are. They have this shell around themselves, this hardy shell that allows it to survive the gastric system. And then once they get to the intestines, they take their shell off, and that's when they go into their live vegetative cell state. So the great thing about spores is their ability to survive and get into the intestines alive. So one of the biggest myths I always talk about is that it needs to be refrigerated to be a good, high quality probiotic. And that myth, it makes sense. It came from, we want a live microorganism. So you'd think, it's alive in the refrigerator. But the key is that we don't need it to be alive in the refrigerator. We need it to be alive in the intestines. So these spores actually don't become alive until they hit the intestines. So they're actually dormant when they're in the bottle. They're dormant when you swallow them. They hit the stomach acid and they're dormant. It's not till they hit the intestines that they take their shell off. They go into their live vegetative cell state and they stay there for about 21 to 28 days, where they're going in there helping get rid of the overgrowth of pathogenic bacteria. They're helping taking our good bacteria and helping it come back to life. So that's one of the big myths I see out there with probiotics is the refrigeration. Another big myth I see out there with probiotics is that you need to switch up your probiotics to get diversity. And, we know that having a diverse microbiome is key to our health. If we have diversity in our microbiome, it's one of the reasons I mentioned about eating a diverse group of foods. If we have a diverse microbiome, that is key to having a healthy microbiome. The spores have been proven to create diversity, because what they're doing is they're going in and if we kind of just explain it like a garden, we take a garden, for example, and in the garden, we compare that to our gut. But in the garden, you have good plants and you have weeds growing in that garden. And you compare that to a gut that's got good bacteria and then overgrowth of pathogenic bacteria. In that garden analogy, what the spores do is they go in there and they help get rid of the weeds in the garden. So the spores are helping get rid of that overgrowth of the pathogenic bacteria. And then what they do is they take those plants that have been stepped on and trampled on that are not thriving in that garden, and they help bring those back to life. That's how you create diversity in your microbiome, is taking the bacteria that already belong to you, that aren't really flourishing in your gut, and help bring them back to life. And that's truly how you're creating diversity. Because back to that garden analogy, if you take a common lactobacillus or bifidobacterium type of probiotic and you put it into that garden, let's say it survives. Let's just say, for argument's sake, it survives. It somehow gets to the intestines. It gets into that garden. It may like plant a new plant in that garden, but it's not doing anything with those weeds that are there. It may plant a new plant, but it's not doing anything with weeds. It's not helping those good plants that have been stepped on and trampled on come back to life. They're just basically, it's just planting a new plant in there. And so then maybe you take another lactobacillus type of strain and you put another plant in there. And so now you've got a couple more plants in there. But again, it's not creating this lush, beautiful garden where the spores are getting rid of the pathogenic bacteria. It's helping bring our good bacteria back to life. And that's how you create true diversity in a healthy microbiome.
That was such a great explanation. And so, there are so many myths, and also the idea that these are, you can just take them for a certain period of time, and then, but stress or so many things in the environment are going to damage it. So what are your thoughts about it? Because, when we look at our ancestors, which you brought up, I mean, they didn't need to take a probiotic because they were playing in the dirt.
Yes.
But also they were eating fermented food. They had,
Yes.
And so they were getting this content in foods. But what's happened today? How many people are actually eating that kind of diet that is rich in fermented foods with those cultures?
Yeah, well, virtually nobody is. I mean, really, we're not getting, our soil is depleted. It's overfarmed, depleted of all these nutrients. So we're really not getting it. And I would love to say, for prebiotics, I would say, okay, for a prebiotic, yes, you had asked me what the difference between them is. So a prebiotic, of course, is like that same garden analogy. It's like the fertilizer for the garden. So all the good work the probiotic is doing, the prebiotic is making it better. The problem with prebiotics, of course, is that sometimes when you have an overgrowth, if you take that garden, you've got weeds, and now you're putting fertilizer on the weeds, you're just growing the weeds. So we work with particular ingredients that we call it a precision prebiotic, because it's precisely only feeding the beneficial bacteria, which is very different than what you see. But nonetheless, back to like foods, like you could get lots of prebiotic foods. I mean, we've got like asparagus, artichoke, the Jerusalem artichokes. I mean, you've got lots of different prebiotic foods that we could be eating on a regular basis. You need to consume a lot of them. But with a probiotic, we're not getting these bacillus strains anywhere. I mean, we are just not getting them anywhere unless we're living in a tribe in Tanzania. Like I said, I mean, we're not seeing them. So it is really important, and it's a huge tool in our toolbox to be taking a spore-based probiotic because of its ability to actually create diversity in the microbiome, its ability to survive that gastric system and get there alive and make a true change in the gut. And the big thing, one of the things that has been really top of mind for me lately is just seeing this influx of gut health supplements out there. We've been in this for 12, 13 years now. We were disruptors in the market when we came to the market with a spore-based probiotic. It was like nobody had ever heard of anything like this. They didn't understand why it didn't need to be refrigerated. And I just always encourage people to really understand what these, they have the genus, species, and strain when you're talking about a probiotic. So in the case of a bacillus strain, it's bacillus is the genus, species, and strain. So genus is bacillus, species is subtilis, and the strain is HU58. That's an example for our product. So what we want to make sure is that when you're working with probiotics, you have one that has the genus, species, and strain ID. The strain ID is very, very important. We need to focus on that strain ID because that's where you have it, where the efficacy of that particular strain comes from. And should be associated with that strain ID studies. Where we get in the problem is that a lot of companies are taking, this strain ID and another strain ID and another strain and mixing them all together. And then we don't know what happens with them. And that is one of the biggest differences with Just Thrive is that the 4 strains that are used in our product actually have been studied together. And we know we did a double-blind human clinical trial on leaky gut showing that these strains are actually sealing up the leakiness of the gut. And this was just after 30 days. I mean, I don't know of a study of its kind, of this magnitude, but it's just really important because it's one of the things that's driving me crazy right now is that, you're seeing this amazing study on Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG, great study on that particular strain if you're taking it as a single use. But where are the studies when you mix it with another product? One of our products is called Just Calm. It has Bifidolongum 1714 in it. When we mix that 1714 with another well-studied strain, the effects of that 1714 strain were not working. I mean, they literally, all negated all of the positive effects of that 1714 strain. So it's really important that you have a probiotic that is actually studied of the finished formulation of the products that are in the product.
Yeah, that is so, so important. And I think the other issue, it's just the marketing of this. So go to a grocery store, just the yogurt alone, like live cultures, like everything you see, it's like added live cultures, probiotic strains, and you just, those are, I'm sure you have opinions about those, people who think that they are eating for good gut health because they're eating yogurt, which is, of course, sweetened with lots of sugar, typically. Yes. Probiotics that haven't survived the trip to the grocery store, let alone when you're actually eating them weeks later.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And sugar is another big offender of our gut health. And so now we're taking something that is supposedly helping our gut, but it's in fact harming our gut.
Yes. So I have I have a special yogurt maker, and I've been making yogurt for a long time, and but I have used the strain, so just breaking apart the capsule. And I don't know if it's doing any good.
Yeah, absolutely it is. Absolutely. No, I think a lot of our customers do that. They use the spores to, make yogurt and ferment food. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it is very easy with these. I just fermented for a long period of time, and it's delicious actually. So, you're getting that culture on steroids.
Yes, exactly.
So your story, I think, is one of such courage, and how you came to this work that you now with your passion, and how you have grown this company. It's a really remarkable success story. So I'd love for you to share with our listeners what inspired you, because you came from a background of family in pharmaceuticals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was in law. So I was in litigation for several years. And then I started having children and wanted more of a work-life balance. So I was fortunate enough to be able to go part-time in a family pharmaceutical business. And it was really great because I'm like, this is great. We're helping save people's lives, delivering life-saving medication. It was really fun to be in that industry. And then after being in the industry, didn't take too long to see all of the abuses that were going on. And my husband was also in the industry as well. And we would just be like, this is crazy. And I grew up with immigrant parents. We were not big, going out, and, my mom cooked at home. My mom breastfed when it wasn't popular to breastfeed. And, we weren't like that anyway. And so after being in that industry, we saw so many of the abuses. We saw one particular example comes to mind is one of these pharmaceutical reps came into our office and said, we won this big bid for one of the largest hospital systems in the country for a cholesterol drug. And the pharmaceutical rep came in and said, now, you know what my job is? My job now is to go to every doctor in this hospital system and tell them to lower the lever of when they prescribe that drug so we could prescribe more of it. And Billy, my husband, and I were like, that's horrible. And then it's like all these light bulbs went off in our head. Like we thought about relatives who had been on one pharmaceutical. Next thing you know, she was on a dozen different pharmaceuticals and never getting better, and ultimately dying of stomach cancer because her intestines were just shot from all of the, pharmaceuticals she was on. And so we decided to pivot. My husband was seeing a naturopathic physician and they talked about different ideas. And that was where we met Karan Krishnan, who has become a dear friend. And we decided to launch Just Thrive. And that's where it came from. We took our life savings into it, poured it into it. This was at a time when our kids were approaching college age. And we were like, what are we doing? And it was, I never look back because we were doing the right thing. And to this day, we've never taken a penny of investors. It's all been, not that there's anything wrong if you do, but it's just nice that we have only ourselves to answer to. And it's been, when you come from a place of good and making people feel better, it's amazing what happens. And you're changing lives every day. And I've always even felt like other probiotics are not my competition. I've always felt that pharma is our competitor. I just want to get people off of pharmaceuticals. If somebody starts to learn about a probiotic because that company has millions of dollars to spend on advertising and, they learn about probiotics, I think that's great. Eventually they'll do the research and they'll understand and they'll grow in their health journey and they'll probably come to us. But nonetheless, I just feel like the pharma industry is really more of my competitor because I just want people to come into this natural way of life and empower themselves in their own health journey.
Wow, so beautifully said. And your mission really resonates with me, and I think we have a lot of similarities. And we're both in a consumer health summit, and where we talk so much about a business with integrity, heart-centered, mission-driven, and and your success is attributed to that. This is a family business; it's passion, and you are so transforming the health of millions of people. And that's what gets me every time too. And I think, like how many coaches have we trained, and how are they impacting their families, their communities? So many lives are changing for the better. And so I know you share that mission as well to really create better health.
I definitely do. And I'm a huge believer in health coaches. We have the health coaches on our team that work with our customers because we stand behind what we say about really trying to empower people to, take control of their health. So I love what you're doing with the health coaches and all the health coaches out there that are just really trying to make a huge difference in people's health. It's fun. It's just so fun. And you are such an inspiration to me. And I knew you well before any of this, and the work that you've done with us is you're just amazing. You're an amazing human being.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you for being on Health Coach Talk. It really means a lot. And you're so passionate about your work and this mission. And health coaches are perfectly suited to provide this kind of support and education in this confusing world of
Yes. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So where can people find you? Where can they find Just Thrive Probiotics?
The best place would be at justthrivehealth.com. And I believe we have a coupon code for your audience. It's FMCA. Is that it? FMCA 20. FMCA 20 for that's 20% off site-wide. So that would be the best place. Of course, on Instagram, it's Just Thrive Health. Facebook, it's Just Thrive. But those would be the best place. And like I said, we have health coaches. If you have other questions, you could set up an appointment with them and they could talk to you all about the different health products we have. We always recommend people start with the probiotic because it's so foundational to our overall health. But if there are other more significant issues that you're working with or dealing with, they could certainly walk you through those products.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much. It's just been such a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure. Believe me.